Today's guest is Whitney Hansen, who figured out money at a very young age. She's going to share her money journey with us today. Welcome to Richer Soul, your journey to a more purposeful, intentional, amazing life. Where are you going to go and how are you going to get there? Let's figure that out together. At the core is the financial well-being to be able to do what you want, when you want, how you want. It's about personal freedom and abundance. Please check out the Facebook page, facebook.com/Richer Soul. That's where I share interesting articles that I've read during the week. Also, if you get a chance, stop by the website, richersoul.com. Sign up for my email list. It's the best way for us to communicate going forward. Are you creating the life you deserve? That's the question you need to answer. It happens one step at a time, and it's a journey, because that's where the fun happens. My goal is to help you figure out your puzzle pieces and how they come together to design a great life. That means we have to understand where we're going. In other words, what's our purpose? We also need to be healthy enough to be able to do what we want and have the time to be able to do so. We need the financial resources to fund the life we choose. Living life alone gets kind of lonely, so creating strong relationships and being part of something bigger spiritually. While we all know this, and yet we're stuck listening to those voices in our head that create fear and hold us back from the life we deserve. If you haven't had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to do so. It provides the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create balance in your life. Too often we have so many competing priorities. We need to find a way to keep them all in harmony. Many times work takes over or family pulls us another direction. A surprise sends our finances into the negative. Having someone to help you look over all those pieces and help us find balance is the job of a conductor. If you want to climb Mount Everest, you'll need a few Sherpas, guides who know the way and can help you to the top. In both of these roles, it's you that has to do the work. I'm just here to guide, teach, and show a path. Before we meet Whitney, I just want to say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. You basically have a few days left to put together your plans to launch 2018. Last year at this time, I was working frantically to make this podcast a reality for the year. Thank you for all of you who've listened. It's been a really fun year for me, and we've had a chance to meet some really cool people and learn some interesting things about money and our mindsets. Whitney Hansen is a personal finance coach and entrepreneur. She teaches overwhelmed millennials how to pay off debt and be financially independent. She gives them the tools to have more fun with money while sprinkling in a little silliness. Some of her accomplishments are paying off a $30,000 debt in 10 months, buying her first home at 19, and paying $472 for her master's degree. Let's learn how she did that. Welcome to Richer Soul, Whitney. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, I'm so honored. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. Always wonderful having great guests like yourself. So we always start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
I love that question because I think a lot of this is very common for many people in the fact that I didn't learn about managing money from my family. And I definitely didn't learn about it from school either. It wasn't required where I grew up. And so my early lessons of managing money came from my mom and dad, who were amazingly hard workers. So I learned that money comes from work. So that part was really great. But then I also learned a few bad habits from my family too. I watched my dad. He had a collectible car problem. And so he would collect old school Camaros and stuff. And so I would see him buying all these random cars. And I was thinking that was a very normal thing. So that was something I had to kind of work through as I got a little bit older. But the cool thing and not so cool thing, I guess, about my journey growing up is I grew up in a very dysfunctional home. So it was full of addiction and abuse, and it was really not a healthy environment at all. And I remember my mom finally did divorce my dad, which was a really good thing. And so the question I asked her later is, Mom, why did you stay in that relationship? Like, why were you married for so long to a guy that was abusive and a total jerk. What was going on there? And the reason she was stuck in that relationship was solely because of money. She didn't have the money to leave. And so I was about 16 years old when that started to teach me that when you have money, you have options. And when you don't have money, sometimes you're stuck in a really bad situation and you can't leave it as easily as people think because you don't have those funds. That's where I started to learn that money comes from hard work and that money is also freedom. And so I learned that when I was about 16 years old. And that has been a big portion of my life ever since. And I always go back to that framework that I learned early on.
And that's true. I mean, when you have financial abundance, you get to make your own choices. You get to choose how you want to live life, and you get the ability to say no, and the ability to walk away from situations, and the ability to go towards situations because you have the finances to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's powerful. And I think sometimes we think that you have to have a lot of money too. Like it's got to be $1 million before I can actually have that true freedom. And I think for a lot of people, it's as simple as paying off debt and just building up an emergency fund that's moderate. I mean, a couple months of expenses can be life-changing for most people. So it doesn't have to be millions of dollars either.
No, I think we overestimate how much money we need to have to start enjoying abundance. And the other thing
Totally.
is, you can't wait until you have money to enjoy life because for a lot of people, there won't be much life left to lead at that point. So you've got to enjoy the journey and have fun on the way as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. You're spot on.
So you learned about money relatively young at 16, and then you bought a home at 19. What was that all about?
It's kind of a weird moment. So I was 19. I worked all through undergrad as a nail technician. So I did cosmetology school right after high school. Like actually the night I graduated, I moved to Boise, which was 2 hours away from where I grew up, and started cosmetology school. So I was making decent money as a 18, 19-year-old. And so I, at that time, was just banking up cash. Like I was a really good saver, kind of a scarcity mindset, honestly, but I saved a lot. And so in October of 2008, market crashed. And I was looking around me, seeing that I was paying, quite a bit of money for rent. And I was looking at all the different houses that were going foreclosed on and the market just tanking. I was like, wow, this is a really great opportunity. If I can actually buy a house right now, that's going to be perfect. And so that's when I started going through the framework and the homework of getting everything lined up, all my ducks in the row, and was able to buy my first house when I was 19. And so I rented a couple rooms out to a couple of my friends. So they were helping me pay my house payment. And it worked out really well. I think I was paying like $400 a month out of my own pocket for my house. And it was cool. It worked out really well. I don't always recommend that, but for most 19-year-olds, it's probably not a great idea. But it was a lot of good luck and a lot of good timing when the market crashed for me, that it was a great opportunity.
And so there's certain lessons in there that I would love to dig into because, first of all, to do that at 19 is impressive. How do you think that you got the smarts to be able to make those kinds of decisions so early?
Yeah, I think it was because I was so dead set on being financially independent, and I didn't have like the family support system to help me fund my life. And so I knew it was, I'm on my own. I've got to figure this out. And at that time, it was kind of a no-brainer when I was looking at, I can own a home and pay $400 a month, or I can rent and also pay $400 a month and get no ownership over that at all and no control. And I couldn't paint and I couldn't remodel if I wanted to. So for me, that was like, okay, this is a good opportunity. Let's go that route. So honestly, it was just, I was so set on being financially independent. I just didn't want to live a situation like my mom lived. And so I was doing everything I possibly could to put my own foot down, to be an adult, to do my own stuff and live a better life. And so that's really what was driving me.
That's awesome. You took adversity and you turned it into financial freedom, which is cool. So how did you because you said the word scarcity. So was that because what caused the scarcity mentality that allowed you to be such a saver?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think so many of us are taught from a very early age, and we don't even quite realize it, that money is it's a very limited commodity. Like there's not enough. It's a certain amount, and you've got to be very frugal, or you can't get to the next level. And so for me, that showed up in my life as my parents saying, "Money doesn't grow on trees. Make sure you shut the door. We're not paying to heat the whole outside." Very common stuff that parents would complain about, and I totally understand. But what that does is that was training me from a very early age that money was a limited resource. And so even seeing my mom struggle and seeing her go through lots of difficulties financially with not having an education and trying to be a mom to 6 kids and a single mom with 6 kids. So seeing her struggle, even her mindset at that time was, I don't have enough money for this. And she truly didn't. It's not wrong. But I was learning from that, and I was a sponge, and I was soaking in the whole time that, oh, I've got to save as much money as I can because I'm not going to get any more later. So I have to hoard as much as I can financially if I want to have a good life later on. And so I think that's really where it stemmed from, is just growing up in an environment where money was hard to come by. And you really, there was never enough. You have to really hoard it or you're not going to get enough money later. And so that's where I stemmed from. And it was hard to break through that mindset, Rocky. It really was.
It is hard to break through the conditioning that we have. And so it sounds like you have broken through that. You're no longer in a scarcity mindset.
Oh, I still struggle with it. I really do. I'm still naturally a really good saver. And I've noticed that even in my own business, it comes out too when I'm hesitant to make bigger investments, even though I know I should and it's the right thing to do and I have the money. I still am like, oh, I don't know if I should do that. So I still struggle with this from time to time.
So, well, let's talk, because I would assume in 2008, the market's crashing, housing prices are falling, everyone's fearful, and you're like, I'm going to go buy a house. It didn't sound like you had scarcity or fear in that moment.
The scarcity thing, not as much, because I do a lot of risk analysis in my own head. And I think we all do. We're always looking at like, okay, what's this worst case scenario if I buy this house and I can't afford it? Or if I buy this house and something happens or whatever, I lose my job. So I think we're always doing some risk analysis there. And for me, it was a no-brainer. I could afford the payment. I could easily afford it if I had a couple of roommates. And so it was a good fit in my head. So it didn't seem to be risky, or I wasn't afraid of putting the money into it because I knew that it was a safe bet, or safer bet, I should say.
Very cool. Now, at some point, you got into a bunch of debt, correct?
Yeah, I did.
So what was that all about?
Oh, it was doing what I thought was the right decision. I went through undergrad and I was studying accounting. So we are kindred spirits, your wife and I understand that. So I was studying accounting and took out as much student loans as I could because I thought that was normal. And I was told, and again, back to that conditioning and that mindset, I was told that when you graduate, you are going to make a lot of money. You'll be getting 6 figures, no problem. You just have to have that degree, that piece of paper. And so I was like, oh, okay, let's do this. I mean, I don't want to have to struggle that much during school. So I just took out enough student loans to get me by. And when I graduated in 2010, it was $30,000 of debt. I was like, oh gosh, that's a lot of money. I wish I would have paid a little bit closer attention or worked harder or did something different. It was a lot of money to a 21-year-old, especially. I was looking at that thinking, crap, I'm in trouble.
And did you get the 6-figure job?
No, I didn't. Not at all.
Well, eventually you do, but it takes a while, doesn't it?
It took a while. Yeah, it took probably about almost 10 years.
And so what did you do? You had this $30K in debt, and I know you've got the scarcity mindset probably still at that point. How did you handle this?
Yeah, so that scarcity mindset was actually kind of beneficial at that point too, because instead of thinking, oh, money's just going to come flowing to me, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to pay this off because what if I don't have enough money? What if I lose my job? That monthly cash flow, that debt payment, that's going to kill me. And so I had this fork in the road decision where I kind of mentioned earlier, I was working as a nail tech all through undergrad. And so I had dreamed of quitting that job for 4.5 years. And it was finally my moment to quit. And I was like, all right, I've got this. I'm going to quit this job and I'm never turning around. And I got a job as a staff accountant right out of college. So I was thinking I was sitting in a pretty good place. And then I had that moment of, if I want to pay off this debt, I can reduce my expenses as much as I possibly can. But at some point I have to focus on my income. And for me, the nail job, the salon job, was a good way for me to increase my income. And so that's what I did. I kept working that job. So I was working as a nail tech and a staff accountant, which is a really strange combination, and did that for, a year was my goal. I thought, okay, if I can do this for a year and pay off the debt, then I'm going to just keep doing that. And so I knew I could live on the salon income because I'd proved to myself I could do that. That was nothing new. And so all of my accounting income, all of my accounting checks went directly towards my debt. And then I reduced my expenses even further. And I kept reducing and going into this, if it's not a bare minimum, I'm not going to do it. So no eating out, no Starbucks, nothing at all, no extras, no brownies at the grocery store. It was the bare minimums there. And so that plan allowed me to pay off the entire $30,000 in just 10 months. And so that's where I started to see that, when you focus on something and when you go all in on one goal and you do the hard work temporarily, it's not forever. It was for me just 10 months, which was, you can do anything for 10 months. That's when I started to realize the power of all of those things and basic financial principles. It matters. So you've got to do the hard work in the short run. But that's exactly how I was able to pay it off, was working the 2 jobs, 70 to 80 hours a week. And I continued doing that even after I paid off the debt to build up a really big savings account too.
Cool. Congrats on doing that.
Thank you.
It takes effort and work. And as Dave Ramsey says, live like no one else so you can live like no one else.
It's the truth. Yeah.
It's the truth. And that's the thing. This is not rocket science. This is simple, basic stuff. But it's hard and it takes work.
It's very hard. Yeah. It's discipline, and that's hard for people.
Correct. And making sacrifices. But if you do that, the outcome at the other end is much, much greater.
Yeah.
So then you went and got a master's degree, but you did this differently, didn't you?
I did. I learned my lesson, Rocky.
So how did you get a master's degree for a whopping $472?
Yeah. So most people are like, is that a legit degree? And it actually is. I did the work. How I did it was when I was going back, I was sick of accounting. I worked in it for a couple of years and realized I put my ladder on the wrong building. So I needed to move that ladder and go somewhere else. And so I initially thought corporate marketing, that was going to be my gig. I thought it's kind of a fun job. I'm pretty good at marketing. So I thought that was the area I wanted to go down. So I knew I needed a master's degree at that stage to help me get some of the bigger gigs with corporate marketing kind of jobs. And so when I was looking at all the different ways to pay for college, there were a ton. I literally wrote out every single area that you could try to pay for college. So there's tuition reimbursement, working for a company where they give you a little bit of a fee back for you continuing your education. There was cash flowing it myself. So working a couple jobs and just saving up the cash to pay for my education. I looked at military options. I looked at, not student loans. I did not look at student loans, but I looked at scholarships. Anything that I thought was a potential way to save some cash and fund my college degree. And ultimately, what happened, it was really random, but I was talking with a gal at the salon, and she was telling me that she worked for Boise State. And we were talking about her career and her job, and she was saying they were looking for somebody to do some grant management and budgeting for this really big grant that they got for the state of Idaho. And so I heard that and was like, oh, that's cool. And then one of the things that she told me really sparked my interest. She said, one of the cool benefits of working for a university is you get a discount on tuition. And my ears perked up and I said, tell me more about that. What is this discount? How big of a discount are we talking? And she said, for every 9 credits that you take, if you are a full-time employee for a university, then you can go back for $5 per credit. And so I was like, what is this? This is amazing. So I took a job with them, and that's how I was able to cash flow my schooling. So it ended up costing me $472 because there were a couple late fees in there too. But that's how I was able to fund it, was just by being an employee of a university. And that's full-time and sometimes even part-time positions. That's not like a student assistant position. It's a legitimate job. So you've got to be employed correctly, not as like a temporary employee. But almost every university offers that incentive. It's really cool.
And that's I wonder if you could get a job at a university at 18. It's probably a lot harder.
I bet you could, though. If it was like a really basic position, maybe you're doing some administrative stuff. The tricky part is you've got to be able to manage your school schedule and working ideally full time, which can get a little messy. But most universities are very accepting over that too, and will work with your schedule. So it's a dang good option to go.
Very true. My daughter is getting ready for college, so I know how expensive it can be. And we've had long and hard conversations about the fact that I will not be writing you checks. So figure out how to pay for college. If you're smart enough to go there, you're smart enough to pay for it without loans. So she's been working hard on scholarships and doing that. But great. For a master's, it makes a lot of sense to figure out another path. I think that's the thing. A lot of people get stuck and they don't see all the different opportunities. And it sounds like you actually sat down and said, what are all the different ways I can do this? Mm-hmm. Which one works for me and which is kind of the best? So after you got your master's and you left, did you leave the job at the university, I'm guessing?
I did leave that position. Yep.
And what'd you do next?
So my next thing, it was interesting. That's where business stuff came into play. I was very set on corporate career. I was going to climb that ladder as high as I possibly could. And when I did I was in my second year of the MBA program, and I heard about this little thing called Venture College at Boise State. And the whole premise was the university was trying to create economic development in Boise by getting students to start businesses while they're still students. So kind of a weird little twist there. And so I had somebody pitch the idea to me in a class. And I immediately was like, hey, that's kind of cool. And at that time, I was coaching people a little bit here and there. So I was sitting down with friends and family and teaching them how to live on a budget and pay off debt, much like I did. And when I was going through the venture college stuff, my goal was to try to make a couple $1,000s a month off of coaching and helping people. I thought that would be pretty sweet. And so that's where I started, and that's where the business blossomed. So thankfully it did, because I'm afraid I would still be in corporate marketing. And for me, that would be not great. It's not really where my soul feels the most filled. So it was able to start my business and start working on it in a very safe environment with mentors that were phenomenal and had been down that road millions of times. And so that guidance and that advice was so helpful when I first got started. But that's where the business part came from. And that's today what I do.
And having that help, whether it be a mentor or a coach or something else that can give you, that has those years of advice that can help speed up your ability to achieve what you want in a much faster time frame, is quite important. And it doesn't even sound like you had to really pay for that, did you?
No, it was free as a student. So students have a ton of really great opportunities. You just have to look for them too.
Absolutely. So you were coaching people around budgeting, and to me, and probably to most people, the word budget sucks.
It does.
So how do you get people to stay on a budget and accept it?
Yeah. Most of the people that I work with, and you probably do as well, I'm sure, when they come to you for coaching, they're so fed up of doing what they've been doing and not seeing results and feeling broke and just utterly being unimpressed with their financial life. And so by the time they reach out to me, they're so willing to try something different and purposely do something that's not their norm, that they're willing to take that risk. I say risk loosely. It's actually a great reward, but in that time, it does feel like a risk. But they're very willing to invest in that piece of it because they are so sick of being broke. And so that freedom, that joy, that this could be my life is what they're really looking for. And so I used to think that would be a really tough sell, but it's not. When people are fed up and they're tired of it and they want something different, it's actually easier to get them to stick to a plan if they're truly fed up.
And so is that you have to wait for people to get fed up before they'll change, I guess.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. I haven't found a way to force people into change as much as I try with my family. It doesn't work.
No, people are very stuck in their ways. And so
it's true.
It's not easy. So do you think that traditional financial advice works?
Well, it depends on who you ask. So if you're asking traditional financial people, yes, they think it does work. And it might for some. But I think that traditional financial advice has got us into a lot of trouble. I also am a big Dave Ramsey fan too. So I agree with a lot of what he says, that we should not be going so far into debt for the chance that we might be able to pay it back later, or, to look cool for a couple minutes, or to just have that moment of instant gratification. That's really dangerous and it's very detrimental to people. And so I think that traditional financial advice in the sense of our debt, our willingness to tolerate debt, is completely wrong. I think we need to be much more aggressive about not going into debt. But I think there's some elements of traditional financial education that's good, like the pay yourself first, and you should be saving 10% of your income at least for your future. I think that's wise advice for sure. But we do need to be very, very careful about how we approach traditional financial education when it comes to debt and student loans and credit cards. And it's a very slippery slope that gets way too many people into trouble.
I'm not exactly sure where this 10% number came from. I think it was kind of based on you graduate college around 22 and you retire at 65. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the 10% number comes from. But that's a long time to wait. It
is a long time.
If you can up your savings rate to 20% or 30%, I know there are some people who promote 50%. Mm-hmm. The higher your savings rate, the lower your spending, the faster you can achieve financial freedom.
Completely. And I think if you have that ability to do so, you live on very, very little for a short time period. Again, it's always temporary sacrifice, and invest as much as you possibly can, because you're spot on. That's how you get very, very wealthy. For some people I've noticed that I coach, even 10% is really hard for them. And so that's where it starts to become a question of, please put some money away. If you're putting 1%, I'm happy. Like, just put something away. But of course, the more that you can, the better for sure.
Well, yeah. And I mean, to start for a lot of people to say tomorrow I'm going to save 10% is difficult. But if you start with 1 or 2% today, and next year when you get a raise, you add a couple percent and you keep doing that, there's no reason why within 5 years you can't be at 10%. And within 10 years, you can be at 20%.
Completely.
You just have to make the commitment and just keep upping your savings rate little by little. We don't miss small things. And so if we just keep making small changes, it's not going to happen overnight, but over time, you'll be able to save a large amount of money.
Yeah, Rocky, you said a really smart thing too that I hope the listeners caught on to. And that was when you said, if you get a raise, to save that raise. So many people don't do that. And I think that's incredibly intelligent and a great habit for people to build into their life, is to save those raises and not increase their lifestyle immediately. Super, super smart.
And that's what most people do. If you hold back your lifestyle for a few years and then start to increase it as your income is kind of way ahead of the curve, you end up in a much better situation.
Completely. Totally worth it. And like you said too, you're not going to miss that extra income. And for most people too, when you see your investments growing and your savings growing, that is so exciting that you get a lot more joy from that than buying a new car and driving around with this really cool car that you feel like you're still paycheck to paycheck every month. When you see that investments grow, that's where I think it's super exciting. But I don't know if that's just a nerdy financial person stuff to say.
It might be. I feel the same way. And I honestly, and I think we probably should reiterate it. Your first $1,000 is the hardest. Your second 1,000 is easy. Your first 10,000 is hard. Your second 10,000 is easy. And that goes up. You know, your first 100,000, your first 500,000, your first million is hard. But your second million is so easy. If you can figure out how to get to 1 million, that second million just, it happens in a fraction of the time, and it just happens almost automatically. So if you can put the processes in place and do the hard work for the first, the second just rolls along quite quickly.
Completely. I'm with you 100% on that.
What is the biggest mistake you see most people make financially?
Oh, the biggest mistake is they're just not paying attention. They're afraid of looking at their bank account. They're afraid to live on a budget because they feel like it's so restrictive and I can't do anything and my life is officially over. It's that fear of actually knowing what's truly going on in your life. So I think the biggest mistake is you just ignore it. You think, I'll make more money next year and then I can start to, it'll eventually work out. It'll be fine. Life's going to go on, and it will, but your financial life compounds in a positive or a negative way. And the more you ignore it and the more you just push it aside and, I'll worry about this next year may not be any better. And so I see way too many people just ignore it until they think it'll be better later. And it just doesn't work that way.
And then they hit rock bottom. And then they finally change.
Then they're fed up and then they call us.
Yeah, that's a shame.
It is a shame. It's a huge shame.
So you have your own podcast, Money Nerds. What have you learned from all your podcast interviews?
Oh, yeah. I've been doing it for a little over a year now. And one of the things that I have noticed from people that have accomplished really cool stuff financially, so maybe it's paying off a ton of debt or retiring early or getting a really amazing career, whatever their version of financial success is, almost every single guest has told me that they were obsessed with their goal. And I think we hear obsessed and we immediately think it's a negative word. Like, oh, I don't want to be obsessed. That's not good. We should have balance in our life. But from the people I've chatted with, when they were completely obsessed with their goal, that's when they saw the best progress. And so that was one of the things that really shocked me, was just how obsessed they were. And I thought that was so cool.
When you put your focus and your intention on trying to achieve something, it makes it a lot easier because you can close out the shiny objects that come along. You also have a choice to make. When you know where you're going and what you're doing and what you want, it's much easier to make that choice in the heat of the moment. Do I want to buy this, or do I want to achieve my goal of financial success? And so now you have a trade-off that you can make. And being able to make that trade-off helps you to say no to the item in front of you at that moment. And it allows you to build that strong foundation.
Oh, amen. Couldn't have said it better. That's perfect. You do have to know what to say yes to and what to say no to. And I think sometimes what you say no to is much harder for people than we think.
Oh, that's very hard. Saying no is extremely hard all the time, I think, because people walk into a store and it's like, the whole world is advertising to you. Everyone wants to get
sale.
Rich, right? It's on sale. Well, that's an excuse to yourself. That's not a... The whole world's advertising to you and telling you that your life will get better if you just give me your money. So it's hard to overcome that. Mm-hmm. And when you have your own success in mind, then it becomes a little easier when you have something to compare it to.
Yeah. There was a great book, too, that talked a lot about how companies market to us. And I think it was The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. One of my favorite books of all time. But one of the things they talk about is how marketers are so good at getting into our heads and just making us think we need something. And it's crazy, but it's true. So you got to be very aware. In a digital world, we're getting more and more thrown at us, too, that we've got to be able to say no to.
And that's exactly, Facebook is nothing more than a marketing platform. It's
completely
to sell you stuff and make you want to buy stuff. And that's just the reality of it. And you should be aware of that and know that that's the deal.
Yeah.
So what mindsets do you think are there that create success?
I think the biggest mindset that people can use to create success is just being disciplined in where you're going and what direction you're going. So disciplined in the sense that you can say no to things, you can say yes to things. Discipline that you're going to do the crappy steps that nobody wants to do day in and day out, because you know that long term that's going to be the best option. And so I think all success, I really truly believe this, comes down to discipline. Can you stick to your plan? Can you stick to your plan when it's not going the way you want it to, or when something happens? can you be disciplined enough to have complete control over what you allow into your life and what you are striving towards? I think that's where success all stems from.
And that's difficult. How do you have any ideas of how to help people create discipline in their life?
Yeah, I think the first thing that people need to do if they're trying to become a lot more disciplined in their life, and let's use the area of financially, because that's a fitting topic to talk about right now. So when it comes to your financial stuff, if you're trying to be more disciplined in that area, then it's actually very easy to stay focused if you surround yourself with inspirational financial materials. So listening to this podcast, finding cool blogs that are speaking to you, talking to people about financial stuff. So surrounding your life around that, becoming obsessed with that one area, that helps you so that discipline muscle is hard for us to use. But if that's all you're thinking about and that's all you're surrounded with, it actually becomes a lot easier to stay disciplined to your plan. And so I think that's where you have to purposely cultivate those things in your life. You have to put yourself out there. You've got to find people that are like-minded. You have to be able to tune out the negativity, tune out the stuff that's not going to help you achieve your goal, whatever area it is that you're trying to work on. And I think that anymore, it's like, it seems like it's hard because there's so much digital just junk in the world and so much digital clutter. But it's actually really easy if you do get very focused in on that one goal. I think it becomes so much easier to stay disciplined with it.
Absolutely. Once you know where you're going, it's a lot easier to get there because you've got that focus and you can move forward. And I know one of the things I've heard you talk about is to stop comparing.
Oh, yes.
So what is that all about?
Oh, comparison it's such a trap. And I think that kind of does go back to discipline. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. It's one of those things where when you're on social media, you're on Instagram and you see, oh, so-and-so just bought a new car. And then you're looking at your old hoopty out there and you're like, oh, my car's not good enough. Mine's really old. Or this person just bought a new house. And then you're looking at your house. And even though you can afford it and it's helping you get your financial freedom long term, you're looking at it thinking, oh, I should be further along in my life. Or comparing your life to your family's. My parents had this type of lifestyle when they were in their 30s and 40s, and here's mine. What's up? And instead of comparing yourself to everybody else's highlight reel, I think you've got to step back and you've got to look at things more holistically. So you have to look at what is their situation. So maybe they bought a new car. Maybe they took a cool trip. Maybe they bought a really sweet house. But what does that mean for their overall financial life? They could be broke as a joke. They could have no money at all. And if you're comparing your life to somebody that's completely broke and you want that life, I mean, by all means do that. But most of the time we are comparing to highlight reels when our situations are not the same. We can't compare. It's not apples to apples. You have to look at the entire picture and see, does this make sense for my current situation? And if it doesn't, it's okay. Like, you can admire from a distance. There's nothing wrong with that. You can use it as inspiration, but I don't think that we should compare so much so that we feel bad about ourselves or we make really, really stupid financial decisions because we're comparing to other people's highlight reels. It's a bad trap for people that live in a digital age for sure.
Very true. And I think a lot of times people also fall into the trap of thinking that highlight reel looks cool. I want that highlight reel, not knowing that if they haven't been intentional in thinking about it, while it may look cool, it may not be the highlight reel that you really want for your life. And if you're chasing other people's highlights, you're missing your own highlights, the ones that you truly would love and enjoy because you got distracted somewhere along the way.
No, I think that's spot on. There's so many times where I see people's really cool trips on Instagram, and I'm a big traveler myself, so I find a lot of inspiration from that. But then I'm also looking at, oh, that'd be so cool if I travel all the time. But then at the same time, I value my home and I value my downtime, and I don't always want to be on the go. And so just because something looks cool doesn't mean that it's actually a good fit for you at all. You're exactly right.
It took me a long time to learn that lesson.
It's a hard one to learn.
What do you think holds people back from success?
Ourselves. We get so much into our own head And I think the older we get, the harder this is too, because we get more and more where we just don't want to look like a failure. We don't want to flop. And I think that holds us back in so many different ways. If it's a business situation, you don't necessarily want to have to work a full-time job and do your business for the time being, because that's embarrassing. It makes you feel like you're a failure. Or if your business fails and it doesn't work out, then you internalize that and you feel guilty about it. Or if you're trying to get yourself out of debt and you're trying to be better with your financial life, and you are making this decision of, I'm going to go work a part-time job working retail to help me pay off that debt, we sometimes view that as a step backwards when really those can be step forwards. So I think it's important to actually look at that stuff as one-off situations. But I think that's what really holds us back, is the older we get, the more afraid of failure we are, when realistically, there's no such thing as failure. And I think once you learn that and you truly internalize that, you get to have a lot more fun in life, and you start to make some cool choices and get some good rewards. And sometimes you do fail, or quote unquote fail, but it's always, I think, stepping forward. Ideally, if you're trying and you're putting yourself out there, I think that's always what we need. But too many times we're afraid of flopping.
And that's very true. And I think you have to go, if you change your attitude and mindset when you start something, you can kind of help yourself overcome that. So for me, when I launched this podcast, my deal was, you know what? I'm going to put this podcast out. I'm going to learn how to podcast, and I'm going to see what happens. Mm-hmm. And even if no one listens, I don't care. I'm enjoying myself. I'm going to do it.
That's right.
And that made it much easier to just say, I'm going to put this out and let go. And you worry that, oh, what are all these people going to say? The reality is everyone's so stuck in their head, they're not worried about you. They're worried about themselves.
It's true.
So you can go out there and flop, and nobody remembers and no one cares. And if you're not willing to try, you're not going to have the life of success that you so desire.
It's so true. When I started a YouTube channel, I did the video, recorded my first ever video, and I didn't post it for 2 months because I was afraid. And I don't know why. Like, I look back now and nobody watches that video. It's okay. But I'm like, why was I so concerned about that? But we do. We're afraid of what people think and what people are going to think of us. And it's just BS. And when you first start, you're right. Nobody's even looking anyways. So you have nothing to worry about.
So what changed that you finally posted the video?
I don't remember. I think I was just finally like, Whitney, if you want to get ahead in life, if you want this business to grow, and you want to position yourself as an expert, you have to put yourself out there. Even if it hurts, and even if people think you're crazy, you have to put yourself out there. And so I think it was kind of a mindset shift around, this is a kind of a business hack. When you're looking at your business, and if it's a personal brand, this is really tricky, because you think when you put your business out there, when I say Whitney Hansen, that's me as a person, but it's also my business. And what I had to do is I had to separate that, and I'd almost like cut this little cord in my head and say, Whitney Hansen, am an employee of Whitney Hansen Coaching. And if I don't do this, I will get fired. This is my job, is to put myself out there and to help people. And it doesn't matter if I feel like I look like an idiot. My job is to help other people with their financial life. That's my purpose. So you've got to just lean on that purpose too. And that's what was really helpful for me, was getting out of my head, saying it's not about me, it's about helping people. And the more stuck in my head I am, the fewer people that I'm going to help. So that's kind of what worked for me. And that was a few years in the making too, to be honest.
It takes time. And that's just the reality of it. And I think people need to hear that everyone else has got fears as well. Everyone else is kind of afraid to do things, and that either you overcome yourself or you'll never get what you want. And so you have to make that choice.
Mm-hmm. Completely.
So once you launched the video, what happened?
Literally crickets. Rocky, nobody even watched it. I think to this day it's got maybe 200 views, and that's after a few years. So yeah, okay. Nobody watched it.
And so the things that we worry about don't even happen.
No, not at all. They really don't.
That's so true. So and I think you've talked about this a little bit on your show, and we talked a little bit before. Everyone wants to have passive income. And passive income is hard. However, there is one way to do it that's powerful, and I think that everyone can kind of maybe figure out a way to do it themselves, and that's the power of real estate to create wealth. Mm-hmm. What's been your take on that? What are you thinking about real estate and using it as a passive income business?
Oh, I love it. So I have not personally invested too much in real estate aside from my current home. But I think that there's lots of different ways to become a real estate investor. So there's house hacking where you can rent out rooms. That's very much what I did. That's a good way to go. But I am looking into real estate investing in my near future. I'd say probably about 6 or 7 more months, because I see how powerful it is. And I've talked to so many people, even yourself included, that have further solidified that there's multiple ways to make money, and real estate is a good way to potentially make money and get some cash flow. So I'm definitely pursuing that in my near future too. But I'm a big believer in house hacking and just renting out some rooms so that it frees up your cash flow, and then you can reinvest that into another property or your retirement accounts or whatever the heck you're saving for at that time. So I'm a believer. I'm going to the real estate dark side.
There you go. And there's a million ways to make money in real estate. You have to figure out what your particular skill sets are, what you're willing to do, and how you want to tackle it. And the opportunities are there. And now with Airbnb, it's even easier to do house hacking, and you can even make a much greater amount of money, because if you rent out a spare bedroom for a month, maybe you get, I don't know, $400. Or if you rent it out for $100 a night, and you can, 4 nights equals $400. And if you can get more nights than that, you have the power to truly compound and get way ahead with that. So more amazing opportunities. Absolutely.
Yeah. One of my friends did that actually when she was in college. She was renting out, I don't know if it was legal, so definitely check into the rules on that, but she was renting out, subleasing her apartment for Airbnb. And she would go stay at a friend's house when her house was rented. And she was bringing in close to $1,000 a month. That's profit. That's after her paying her normal rent. It was incredible. So after that, I became a believer in Airbnb too.
That's pretty impressive to be able to do that and to generate that kind of revenue. And again, it's work. You have to clean, you have to list your house, you have to do all of these things. But at the end of the day, when you do the work, you make the money.
You do. Yeah. And make sure you figure out the tax piece on that too, because that did come back to bite her a little bit. So you do have to pay taxes on that, just so you guys know. It's not free income.
Yes. Taxes on everything.
Literally everything.
And even in a side business, I think that's one of the biggest problems that business owners have, is that they don't do the tax planning. They just look and say, oh, I have money, and then they start spending it, and they never set money aside for taxes. And depending on the type of business you have, you can have some significant taxes due. And if you don't plan for it, you can find yourself in a big, massive hole very, very quickly. And the IRS is not very forgiving.
No, that's the one person you never want to owe debt to. Never.
Very true. So we've talked a lot about different areas of money. Is there anything else that you think we should share with the audience at this point?
I think the main thing that I really hope the listeners gain from this conversation is that it's important to do the hard work up front, for sure. That includes living on a budget. I think we underestimate, how important budgeting is. And realistically, that's the foundation for your entire financial life. That's your plan. That's your framework to get you to that next level. So I think don't be afraid of creating a budget. And if you like to go out to eat, work that into your budget too. There's no shame. It's your plan. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I hope people walk away from, is the importance of doing the temporary sacrifices, but living on that budget is critical. That's how you get to that next level.
And I think that's something important you said, is if you want to go out to eat, just budget for it and say, you know what, I have a budget for going out to eat. It's X $100 a month. I'm going to do it and enjoy it. And I'm okay with it because I've been intentional in putting together my plan, and I know where my money should go. And one of the areas that I want my money to go is to go out to eat and to enjoy myself. And so just plan for it, the number down, and then you can do it guilt-free. And you'll have the money to do it because you budgeted for that.
Yeah, exactly. And you're not taking out debt for it and charging the credit card. So you can feel better about going out to eat too, instead of feeling like it's going to come back and bite you next month.
Very true. And that's not a good place to be with all that fear and worry of how am I going to pay my bills?
Right.
Very cool. So if people would like to learn more from you and check out your podcast and websites, where do they find you?
The best place that I pretty much live these days is whitneyhansen.com. And on there, you'll find links to free workshops, my blog posts. The podcast is also linked on there, all kinds of fun stuff. So that's the best place to go is whitneyhansen.com.
And I encourage the listeners to go check it out and learn some money tips from Whitney. Thank you for joining us. It was a blast to have you on the show today.
Rocky, thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful you had me on.
I encourage you to check out Whitney's site, whitneyhansen.com. Clearly, where you focus your attention is where you get results. In our conversation today, that became quite clear. Do you understand your statement of cash flows? Do you have a budget? Now is the time to plan for 2018 and decide to make that change. If you had a budget, how'd it go for 2017? It's time for a review. I'd love to hear how you're doing. Also, if there's someone you know who could benefit from what we talked about today, please share the episode. It helps you to build social capital and create better relationships and start better conversations with the people you know. Trust me, they'll appreciate you for sharing it. So, our call to action. What's one small step you can make this week to improve your life? Is it a budget or a cash flow statement? If you have control of your finances, it's a perfect time to review. If not, now is the time to get started for 2018. Please let me know if I can help. What's preventing you from moving forward? And who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Ready to take massive action? I'm here to help you build your path and create the life you deserve. Thanks for listening. You can contact me at rocky@richardsoul.com. Have an abundant week and a happy new year.